Hello my loves, it's Monica and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm so excited because I'm going to be sharing with you all some whimsical, cozy, and just super summery romances that I think are just the perfect books to pick up this upcoming summer season. Yeah, the books that I'm sharing with you guys today are ones that I highly recommend for your next beach read or forest read or hiding from the heat inside while having the air conditioning on your face read. But anyways, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and dive on in. And the first book is one that I actually just read recently, and that is Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies by Heather Fawcett. And this is a fantasy romance novel. It definitely has had a lot of buzz around it, I think in part because there have been a lot of comparisons to Howl's Moving Castle with this one, and I am always hesitant to read books that people compare to Howl's Moving Castle because I just often find them to be lacking in some capacity. While it is very different from Howl's Moving Castle, I do actually think that that is a very apt comparison for this book. Like, I think if you like one, you'll probably like this one too. But basically in this book we follow Emily Wilde, who is this professor of fairy lore, and she is on this academic excursion in order to learn more about this one specific realm of fairy. And she's really struggling to deal with the sort of like culture of the townsfolk of this village, and in general is just struggling a lot in this town. And then one day her academic rival Wendell Brambleby shows up, and she just finds him absolutely insufferable because he's so charming and he's obviously instantly able to charm all of the townsfolk too. But obviously this is a romance, and so you get to watch them as they grow closer and have to work together. And yeah, I just love this one. I love the lore in it. I feel like the author does a really good job of making this world feel very fresh and real and nuanced, and like there's a lot going on, while also not giving us too much that we feel like bogged down, because at its heart this is like meant to be a cozy, more simple kind of romantic read and not like a super high difficult fantasy novel. And I feel like this just strikes a really good balance with that I sometimes find other books sort of in this genre to struggle with wanting to create a really interesting world and maybe doing a bit too much to the detriment of the plot. And this just like strikes such a good balance with that. I found the writing itself to be really fun and engaging, and I loved the characters. And I know a lot of people who have read this have sort of headcanoned Emily as being neurodivergent, which I think is really cool. I love that. This book definitely takes place in winter, but also a chunk takes place like in a forest as Emily is like befriending like a forest fairy creature and like also trying to navigate the like temperamental weather of this village and all of that. So there's definitely a lot of cold weather scenes, but I just think that like forest setting for me like makes this book summery, even though it is maybe more wintry, but whatever, it doesn't matter. Highly recommend it. It's adorable, lovely, and such a cozy, whimsical, romantic read. I also do want to mention that I really loved all of the like environmental themes within that book, and that's something that's definitely been top of mind for me recently, especially with the recent air pollution issue that hit New York City and like the Northeast in general recently, along with the recent Supreme Court ruling that curtails the Environmental Protection Agency's authority to police water pollution, which is quite terrifying actually. Like, I just gotta take a second to say that the EPA's work has saved tens of thousands of lives by protecting us from pollution, not to mention the countless ecosystems. So I will include, in case you're interested, a link down below to learn more about all of this. But you know, just a quick little reminder that one of the best ways that we can continue to fight for the environment is to continue to use our vote to vote in representatives who are climate advocates, and to also use our voices to speak out about issues like this and raise awareness that they're happening. So just wanted to do that. Now moving on to the next book. So the next book that I want to mention is actually a manga series, and it is the Savior's book cafe story in another world. Kind of a verbose title, but I love this series so much. I have the first three. I don't know if the fourth one, I think the fourth one is out, but this series is so cute, so cozy, so wholesome, so whimsical. It's everything that you could possibly want in a manga series, and it's just like so delightful to read. Basically, we follow our main character who is like, she's in her 30s and she's sort of settled in life. You know, she's got a job, she's got a system, she's got a routine, and then one day this like magical being appears and is like, you must go to this other universe and be a savior for them, like be like fight for, you know, good or whatever, and that's your destiny. And our main character is like, I am perfectly content the way that I am. I do not need that headache. And the otherworldly being basically convinces them by saying, you can have whatever you want, any wishes you want, I'll grant them to you. And she wishes to have a book cafe, and that is what she gets. And she gets to run this bookshop cafe, and it's adorable. And then the head of the guard at the palace becomes a frequent guest at said cafe, and there's a little romance between them, and it's so cute. It's just so wholesome. It's so wholesome, so cute. I cannot recommend it enough. If you just want something like simple and cozy and fun to dive into, this series is a fantastic one to pick up. I absolutely adore it. Next is a book that I'm actually really surprised that with the rise of like cozy fantasy and everything, that it hasn't popped off more, but that is The Blood Spell by C.J. Redwine. And I will say that this book is technically part of a series, but you don't have to read them in any real order. They are all sort of standalones, but just within the same universe. And this is the one that I've read. I do really want to read other books in the series though, because I found this one to be so delightful. And it's a retelling of Cinderella, and our main character Blue has magical abilities that she has to hide from the world, and she's trying to use her magical abilities in order to create gold to help the homeless in her kingdom. And she ends up having to team up with this prince that she finds absolutely insufferable after her father dies, and she ends up living with this ruthless, horrible woman. This is just such a cute fantasy, romance, fairy tale kind of book. I love a good Cinderella retelling, and I thought this one was a really fun take on that. Like, you definitely have that sort of wholesome main character. I always love a little bit of an antagonistic relationship between a protagonist and their romantic interest, and especially with this one, I thought that the specific frustration between her and the prince was interesting, because a lot of it had to do with like her sort of view of the prince's morals, and I thought like that whole discourse was interesting in the way that the book, you know, tackled that. It definitely doesn't like go into it super in depth. It very much is a lighter, fun, cute, cozy fantasy, but I liked that it has substance to it, you know? It's not just pure fluffy romance. So I really enjoyed this one. If you love a good fairy tale retelling, highly, highly recommend. Next is Edenbrooke by Julianne Donaldson, and this was so adorable. This is definitely for anyone out there who loves a good Regency romance and you want something that is just like super cute, not a lot of spice. This one is definitely more on the chaste side, like very much on the chaste side. It's just like the most adorable romance ever. Our main character Marianne is a twin, and she's always kind of lived in her twin's shadow. Like, she's always sort of like the forgotten one. And I love this one because like you kind of have this very Mr. Darcy like character, but he's so flirty, which is so fun to read. And I just like love the like interactions between him and our main character. They're so fun. So yeah, if you love a good like light Jane Austen kind of story, like Regency romance, and you want something that's really cute and fluffy, Edenbrooke. You gotta read Edenbrooke. It's so good. Next, I have another book that I'm surprised is not more popular on like internet circles, because it's so like, I think everything that people would be into. So it's Shades of Milk and Honey by Mary Robinette Kowal. And I will say that it is a popular fantasy book. I just like don't really hear people talking about it very often anymore. And that's wild to me, because this is quite literally like a Jane Austen novel, but with fantasy. Like, it's not as light as a lot of other Regency romances you might read are. It very much has like that sort of denseness to it. Like, I think the comparison for this one is Pride and Prejudice meets Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. So yeah, it definitely has that very comedy of manners vibe to it, but that's why I love it, because it genuinely feels like reading, I mean, it's hard to say like it genuinely feels like reading an Austen novel, because like nothing feels like that, but about as close as you can get in my opinion. And the fantasy elements are also just so beautifully interwoven. Basically, in this one, it's like women have the ability to create glamour, and it's, you know, in the same way that in Jane Austen novels, being able to like embroider, and that's like a really important skill for a future wife to have, being able to glamour things or make things beautiful, is also viewed in the same way. And so our main character is this very skilled magician, glamourist, but she's also often overlooked for her sister, who, while not as skilled, is very beautiful. And she ends up finding out that this potential suitor for her sister is trying to take advantage of her sister for her dowry, and so it is on her shoulders to try and basically help her sister and get her out of this potential horrible marriage. And in that whole process, she walks into her own love story. And yeah, it's just really lovely. The perfect read if you are like a genuine Austen fan and you like that writing style, and you don't want, like, you want, because I feel like there are, you know, books that people recommend for Austen readers, and there's Regency romance, and then there's like comedy of manners, and they're like not always the same thing, but this one is both of those things, and so would highly recommend. Next is one that maybe doesn't really need a sell, but I still want to recommend it because I feel like not enough people take the opportunity to read it, and it's such a perfect summertime read, and that is Howl's Moving Castle by Diana Wynne Jones. This is, of course, the book that inspired the wonderful film of the same name, and I love the book because it just like adds so much more to the magic and the lore and the characters that we already love and know from the film. Like, you just get to understand Howl on a different level in this, and he is like a different kind of character, but at the same time, it's interesting to think, like, if all of this stuff is true, what that means for like film Howl, if that makes sense. I don't know. If you love the film and you haven't read the book, I highly recommend doing that this summer because it's so delightful. Like, I love a character like Howl, where you have someone who has power and has like strong convictions and things that they're fighting for, but is also like silly and like kind of unserious at times and vain. I love stories involving vain men as like romantic interests. I don't know what that says about me, but I just love it. Anyways, Howl's Moving Castle. If you haven't read it yet, this is just like me giving a reminder for those of you who have had this on your TBR and have been meaning to read it. Do it this summer. You will not regret it, I promise. And then lastly, one of my absolute favorite Regency fantasy romances that I've ever read, Half a Soul by Olivia Atwater. This book just blew me out of the water, I have to be honest. I often get frustrated when I read romance that like it will be really light and fluffy and that's it. And it's just like light and fluffy romance, and like there's kind of nothing more there. And I love this book because there is more there. Like there like is genuine substance to this book, and I feel like that's, to be honest, I have found to be hard to find. Granted, I'm probably just reading the wrong things, but I do find it to be kind of difficult to find sometimes within like this genre of romance. And so I love this one because yes, there is like cute, fluffy, fun romance happening in this one, but there's also like real issues being like discussed and tackled and like explored. And it's also like, and also just like the relationships within this book just feel very authentic, and like I just like really felt for all the characters, and I loved getting to know all the characters, and I loved the like magical world that this is building, and it made me just so excited for the rest of the series. So what is this book about? It's set in Regency England, and we follow this girl who has half a soul. And so when she was a child, this fairy took half her soul, and so it left her without the ability to really tap into a lot of her emotions, and that has sort of led her to be shunned by society and for her family to feel a lot of shame around her or about her. And she ends up traveling with her aunt and cousin to go into London because her cousin is now able to be married, and her and cousin are very close. But yeah, she ends up getting the attention of Elias Wilder, and he is this lord who is also trying to like help the poor in the city. He's trying to like get people out of these like horrible like work facilities that are like killing people basically. So you have that element, but then you also have this whole like fairy kingdom element. And yeah, I loved this sort of take on a fantasy romance. I thought it was very, very well done, and it just left me wanting more. And this is one that I would absolutely love to see adapted. Like, it would just be so fun and cute and whimsical, and I want it like adapted. I don't want like a super high quality adaptation. Like, I want it to be like kind of like Merlin level, you know? Like, I love a good sort of a little cheesy but also like very emotional and impactful fantasy show, and I feel like we haven't had a good one of those in a while. So I would love for this to be that personally. But yeah, those are the books that I am recommending for anyone out there who is just looking for a cozy, whimsical, romantic read this summer. Again, I would love to hear from you guys. What are some books that you would recommend for anyone looking for this type of story, or for me, because I am always on the lookout and I will 100% be purchasing and reading more, because this is definitely one of my favorite sort of like subgenres of like romance slash fantasy is cozy romantic fantasy. So I'd love to hear from you guys what you would recommend. But thank you all so much for watching, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye!